So I did my individual case study on the Space Shuttle Columbia disaster. The overview, I'm going to go over the background, the aftermath, the ethical issues, ethical theory, code of ethics, potential objections, and then references. Background, on February 1st, 2003, the Space Shuttle Columbia was returning to Earth after spending a little bit more than 2 weeks in space. And as the aircraft was entering the atmosphere, it started to fall apart and it burst in midair and it killed all 7 astronauts on board. It was a 7-member crew consisting of Rick Husband, Michael Anderson, David Brown, Kalpana Chawla, Laurel Clark, and William McCool, and Ian Ramon, who was from Israel. He was part of the Israel Space Agency and was allowed to come onto this mission. During liftoff, in January earlier that year, a piece of foam actually fell from the left bipod ram area on the external fuel tank, and it collided with the shuttle's left wing and damaged some panels on the wing. And this was actually seen by all the people in the mission control. And the damage that was sustained on the wing, it damages heat shield material, which actually at first they didn't know at the time, but it allowed hot gas to penetrate the wing and it caused more internal damage. When the mission control found out about this, a lot of people within NASA wanted to get more pictures on the damage of the wing, and the Department of Defense is actually prepared to help NASA by using their orbital spy cameras to get a closer look. But NASA officials, the ones in charge, rejected this offer and any of the other suggestions that any of the NASA workers made. On the morning of February 1st, the shuttle was making its usual approach, and then Mission Control noticed that the temperature and tire pressure sensors on the left wing vanished. The spacecraft communicator at Mission Control called up to Columbia to try to talk about the air pressure, or the tire pressure, and the temperature readings. The commander, Husband, he responded with only Roger, and it was cut off mid-sentence. 12 minutes later, somebody inside the mission controller received a phone call from the outside, and they informed him that a television station was actually streaming live the space shuttle break apart in the sky. After that, NASA declared the space shuttle a contingency and sent search and rescue teams in the areas of Texas and Louisiana. Then later that day, NASA officially released that the astronauts were all lost. In the weeks following, the Columbia Accident Investigation Board released a report on how the shuttle was destroyed and what led to it. And other than the technical nature, as in like the piece of foam falling, they wrote that it was the cultural traits and organizational practices detrimental to safety that were allowed to develop by NASA. NASA's head officials and the ethical issues, and NASA's head officials failed to act, even though they knew something was wrong from the beginning. The culture of NASA created barriers to where it was hard to get information across to higher ups, or even voice other safety concerns people just might have had. NASA also used a mathematical model to assess the risk of failure of the shuttle based on previous launches, and they decided that the risk was low enough to continue with the mission. The ethical theory that they used, it was ethics of care, and under ethics of care, the obligation to consider the effects of your decisions on others. NASA officials knew of the collision between the foam and the shuttle wing, and they still rejected offers from the Department of Defense and proposals to try to get more information about the damage. And because of lack of communication and information, the shuttle was still allowed to return to Earth without any other safety precautions being taken. So under ethics of care, the officials were unethical in their decision to not act or effectively communicate, as they didn't think of the ultimate price that the astronauts might have to pay if everything did not go according to plan. The Code of Ethics, NASA has a ethics program. It's very extensive. It has training courses, and all NASA employees are given access to as expert ethics advice on any decisions that they might have to make to its employees. And it seems as though this wasn't really used during this time, and this was actually created in 1986 after the Challenger disaster. An objection to ethics of care, financial concerns and less political support for NASA may have placed the officials in a position where it probably would have cost more money and time than they had to fix the problem or communicate the problem. But based on the risk analysis and the success of the previous missions, they felt confident to let the mission continue. Under deontological ethics, NASA used the rules set in the risk analysis and previous missions to ethically make a decision to let the mission continue. In reference.